What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Clemente Collector. And on today's episode, I am here with car dealer Howard Chasser. Howard, thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
So Howard's been on the channel. This will be the 5th time, Howard.
Wow.
You're actually my most appeared guest. So I don't know. We're gonna have to start calling you friend of the show, or I don't know, dealer of the show. We're gonna have to call you something here. All right. So first off, Howard, I'm very, very jealous. You get to go to the show, and your wife can't even give you a hard time about being there. I get back.
My wife can't give me a hard time because she's my ex-wife, not my wife.
Well, you got me there, but some of us being married, us guys who are going out there to collect, we get home and I have 2 young kids. I immediately get the old guilt trip of having a boys weekend, and I actually have a business idea. If you could start writing letters that like I'm helping you at the show, we could start a whole business up like of a lot of us. And if our wives think we're there working, we could maybe not get guilt tripped, maybe, huh?
Well, one of my favorite lines, and I can't take credit for creating it, but somebody shared it with me, and I do pass it on, is I need to sell my collection before I die, or my wife will sell it for what I told her I paid for it.
Yeah, I love that. Yep, that's so true. What day is it here? Wednesday. So are you finally recovered?
Actually, Thursday.
Is it Thursday? Yeah, it is Thursday. So are you recovered from the show?
Just about.
Okay.
It was an exhausting show, physically and mentally.
I'm sure. Was, as far as foot traffic wise and people coming to your table, was it your biggest card show ever?
It was definitely my best and busiest show ever.
Awesome.
I would be shocked. I'm waiting for them if they're going to publish any type of statistics or make any comments. I would be shocked to hear that this was not the busiest national ever.
Yeah.
That show floor was packed from Wednesday through Saturday.
100%. So I'll just reiterate though, as far as actual money that you got from the show, was the most money you brought in at any national as
Yes.
far as, okay, awesome. That's really cool. Have you heard that from other dealers too?
I talked to quite a few dealers when I was there throughout the show, and the consistent comment was, "This is the best show ever. This is my second best show ever. I can't believe how busy it is." Nobody that I spoke to, and this was unusual, nobody I spoke to had anything bad to say.
That's really cool. That's awesome. So let's backtrack a little bit. And I actually, if you guys see me looking down, I have a list of questions here. I didn't want to miss anything. So if people are wondering what I'm looking at, I got a sheet of paper here. I got some great questions here. So let's backtrack a little bit. When you get the call that you're going to get a table, and I heard from another dealer that a booth is 3 tables, I believe. Does the national, when you get the call that you made it, does the national limit how many booths a dealer can have?
So the booth allotment is based on priority. The dealers who have done the show for, I think it's 4 years or 5 years or more, have the option when they select their tables to select more than one table. It's not a table, it's an actual booth.
Right.
To select more than one booth. So the booths are 10 by 15 in Cleveland, so 150 square feet, and they include 3 tables. You can order, as I did, additional tables. You can arrange it however you want, display cases, showcases, safes, all different types of other add-ons. And the lower priority people, I believe it's priority 3 and below, are only allowed to take 1 booth.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's
and they're
good.
doing that because historically there's been an issue where people have taken extra booths that they didn't need or weren't going to use for the pure purpose of subletting it for profit. which
Right.
they have cracked down on significantly. So they're not allowing that to happen. Even if an old timer starts to request more booths than they've taken in the past, they scrutinize that a bit and take a look and ask why.
Okay. Yeah, that
Because
was
they're
actually
trying. There's a lot of dealers that want to get into the show that can't
right.
because there's just not room. So they're trying to do the best they can while honoring the priority system and respecting the people that have supported and done the show for all these years. The ability to try to get more people into the show.
Yeah, so that was actually one of my follow-up questions about subletting. So, yeah, you said this is the first year that they really cracked down on it. So, in your opinion, how did it feel any different? Did it look any different? Could you tell that they cracked down? Like, if I didn't tell you that they cracked down, could you tell, I guess? Like, what did you think the impact was?
I don't think it's a very visible impact. I know part of the impact was I was able to get in. I was one of the last people to get in off the waiting list.
Okay.
So had they not cracked down, I may not have been able to be there.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because like you said, whenever you hear that it's going to be cracked down on, you're not going to buy two booths and rent one out. You're just going to buy one. So it makes perfect
Absolutely.
sense.
Because
So
they've been very, very clear. If they catch you subletting, not only will you lose whatever space you've subletted, you will lose your booth. You will not be allowed back to the national.
wow. So let's talk about, a lot of us collectors don't really understand table locations. A lot of people make assumptions. They go, well, why is vintage not in this area and modern's in this area? You know, we actually had two separate rooms this year, which was kind of cool. Well, why is vintage not on the right side and things on the left side? Or why is, when I walk in, we see these older dealers with baseball mitts and older merchandise, like they're like, I don't. And I'm like, well, there's a process where the dealers get to pick their location. Could you talk a little bit about what that exactly looks like? Because I mean, there's a lot of dealers, so that sounds like anarchy to me. But yeah, could you explain it?
I wouldn't exactly say it's anarchy, but it's quite an interesting process to witness. I think there's ways it could be modernized. I don't know that it would necessarily change much in terms of what collectors are seeing when they walk in the door. But the actual selection process takes up a lot of time. I know Saturday morning I ended up to my booth late because of the nature of how they do the process. So how that works, once again, falls back to that priority ranking. The people who have done the most nationals get to pick their booth first. They have a big map set up on a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
If you're number one, you walk up to that piece of paper and you can select any booth you want on that paper.
Nice.
And so on down the line in priority order. I think the oldest table holder has been doing the show for like 40 some odd years. So they start in the 40s, down into the 30s, 20s, 10s, down to 1 if they get there. Like last year, they sold out of tables before they even reached the end of priority 3s, which was why I was waitlisted, because I was priority 2 last year.
It's interesting to hear that, because that's how I thought it worked. Kind of like a fantasy football draft. You know, you go in order, and if you're last, you get what's left over. But what's interesting to me is I really didn't think your booth location was all that bad. And we know a dealer named Ash who is pretty newer on the scene like yourself as far as being at the National, and you were close to each other. So it made me think this chunk here must have been one of the last. I'm like, why did a dealer want put in a back corner somewhere? Like, it's kind of confusing to me, to be honest.
So that's something I'm less clear on, and I know exactly what you're saying. And I did appreciate the location that I was in. I think that was in part because when they pull people off the waiting list, they're putting them into booths that existing dealers, for one reason or other, were not able to occupy. So, for example, like I picked my booth for next year. I'm not on the waiting list anymore, yay! But that booth is off in the back corner of the room.
Yeah.
So I'm going to certainly make an effort to try to have that switched somehow. But at this point, I'm very grateful after the last few years being on the wait list of just having a table. And I know what you're talking about. A few people commented the larger rooms seem to have much more vintage weighted, where the smaller rooms seem to be much more modern weighted.
Yes.
I know they did very consciously make an effort to try to keep the corporate kind of separate and the breakers kind of separate. So it did feel, to me anyway, when I walked around, and I really only walked around the big room for a few hours, it definitely felt more like a traditional card show rather than having all of these big commercial entities mixed in like it has felt to me in other years. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. I did a winners and losers video, and one of my winners was the layout and the fact that the corporate areas were in corners. I know a lot of dealers were very dissatisfied with being, I called it the wall of corporate last year in Chicago. There was literally a wall in the middle, and the corporate guys all have high walls of stuff, right? And there were dealers, rows of dealers behind that wall, and they were so dissatisfied. They're like, people don't even know we're back here, you know? And I was like, yeah, it really does suck that they did this. Like if I did the layout, like I would either do like in the corners, or I would actually do the back walls. Like I would just go across the back wall, corporate, and almost like make it against the wall kind of thing. I would either do either of those in the future if it's possible. But did anybody tell you like the corporate were kind of dissatisfied with being in a chunk like that, or did you not hear anything about it really?
I didn't hear anything about that. I would be in shock to hear that anybody was dissatisfied. Again, the crowd was so massive.
Yeah.
So massive. It was just unreal Wednesday through Saturday. So I can't imagine that anybody was dissatisfied.
Yeah. So one of the things I brought up was it felt so much more vintage heavy than last year. And other people said that too. It almost felt like a 50-50 split between vintage and modern this year. And last year it didn't feel like that. First off, do you agree? And second off, do you think it's because the people on the bottom of the list that got cut off from Chicago are a lot of modern dealers, and the fact they got cut off, we lost a lot of modern? So
it's interesting. I definitely heard the comment from other people. Last year, I didn't get to walk around almost at all. So It's hard for me to compare to last year. But the show definitely felt like vintage was really well represented. I did not see a ton of modern.
Yeah.
Why? It's interesting. I'm just thinking about it as you asked the question. I don't think it's just about people not getting in who are on the bottom of the list. If we think back the time between last year, the National, and this year, the National, I would say to a large part, like the bottom fell out of a large part of the modern market.
Interesting. That's a good point.
And I suspect, I know I've even seen it at smaller shows, that there aren't as many modern dealers. And I'm wondering, there were probably quite a few people, quote unquote, trying to make a quick buck, some of whom I'm sure took a bath with the falling of the market. Market now seems to be leveled / almost climbing again in certain spots. And so I think there may be less modern dealers, let's call it, or maybe more people doing business. I know I stopped by the trade night, one of the trade nights with one of my kids, and it was jam packed in there, and I felt like I was in a different country. Everybody's talking parallels and prisms and of tens and all this language that I don't know. There was only, I think, about maybe 2 or 3 guys with vintage cards that I saw in there, out of a sea of probably a few hundred people.
I wanted to bring up trade night to you. I find it really interesting the fact that they held 3 trade nights on site. And originally I felt like the space was awesome for it. It was down in the basement, if nobody knows. And to me, it was really nice. There was a lot of tables. To me, there was a lot of space. But unfortunately, I heard there wasn't enough space actually. But the question I had for you actually was, trade night isn't always trade night. From what I hear, is it's actually a lot of people selling. So from a dealer standpoint, I'd love to hear, not necessarily you, but maybe have you heard from other dealers, especially modern dealers? Have they ever said to you, you know what, trade night's kind of undercutting us upstairs? Like it'd probably be good if the National wasn't promoting it. If they want it, have it somewhere else, but you're taking away money that the dealers could be making. So what's your opinion on that?
It's a really, really good question. And I don't know modern dealers well enough that I have those dialogues. So I can't say that I have those dialogues with anybody. That said, I've pretty much, this is only like the second trade night I think I've ever been to. I went to one in Dallas like maybe a year ago. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me when I was at this one, because I actually did end up buying like 1956 Jackie Robinson. And I was standing, I just missed the beautiful 1953 Mantle and 1953 Jackie. I was standing waiting to see if a deal was going to happen. And sadly for me, it did. And I'm realizing, even though there's not a lot of vintage, that it's an opportunity for me to potentially acquire cars, and or to your point, if I chose to put in more hours, it's an opportunity for me to offer additional cars for sale.
Right.
So at the same time, it's become a thing. It's become a phenomenon. And I think there is a lot of trading that does happen. I'm not positive about that because, like I said, I don't pay so much attention to the new cars. But there's definitely also a lot of cash trading hands.
Yeah, right. So it's an interesting thing to talk about because the dealers pay a lot of money to have a table at the show, and then people are spending their cash downstairs. It's just I know there's only a certain level that you could stop, right? But I'm hosting trade night 3 nights in a row. To me, you're not exactly preventing sales after the show. So all right. So tell me a little bit about. So we had a crowd. I saw a ton of Cleveland stuff. Obviously, that makes perfect sense. But I saw a ton of Pittsburgh stuff, which, as far I'm talking about people in the show with jerseys on, and I actually thought about it. This is the closest show to Pittsburgh possible, I believe, because even if you had the show in Philadelphia, even though that's not even on the map here, it's a little bit of a longer drive than Cleveland is. So this is technically the closest show we could possibly have, in my opinion. So it was kind of cool to see. The show's not in Pittsburgh, but it's as close as it can be, and a lot of local people were at the show, so that was really cool. So as far as people coming up to the table, what was either some of the players, some of the sets, pre-war versus vintage, what were people looking for?
No question. I can tell you 4 players were at the top of the list this year. Mickey Mantle, Jackie Robinson, Honus Wagner, and Babe Ruth.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I've been hearing you say Honus Wagner a lot the last couple of years, and it seems like he's still pretty hot out there as far as what people are looking for.
Yep.
Okay. And then as far as pre-war versus vintage, more interest in the vintage end, or is it like a pretty good split? Like, how do you see that?
I'd say in general, there's people that are more into the post-war vintage than the pre-war vintage.
Yeah.
With the exception of Ruth and Wagner. So people who are set building or people who are looking for other players, I think there's a lot more people looking for those post-war cars in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s than the pre-war, 1900 to the 1930s.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. That's how I feel with my group of friends too. A lot more post-war buying. So I got another interesting one to ask you that I would only feel comfortable asking you about this as a dealer. So I've heard my friends complain that sometimes they go to a dealer and they look at the card and they see the pricing and they ask the dealer, hey, could I show you the comps for that card? And the dealer says, I don't look at comps and I'm not going to look at them. So there seems to be almost like a backlash on comps. I know comps like more, you could tell me it's more of a recent phenomenon than it was, I guess, maybe 4 years ago, as far as like everybody's looking at comps now. Now, what's your opinion whenever a dealer doesn't want to look at comps? Like, what's their thought process? What do they want to look at? You know,
It's a fair question to ask, and I think the question really is, can I ask you how you determine the price of your car?
yeah, right.
So comps gets very, very tricky. I think we've talked about it in past videos, because I think there's a lot of people who, I'll use the word, are a little less sophisticated as far as the hobby goes, that believe they're pulling up a comp the last PSA 4 sold for, and that's their comp. That's not an accurate way to look at the price of a car.
Right.
Looking at the average price isn't necessarily the way to look at the price of a car. So a comp, or can I show you a comp or the last comps? And I don't turn people away. I'm happy to look at what people are calling comps.
Right.
But when we're looking at what people are calling comps, I'm not looking at the grade that happens to be on the holder and the price only. I'm looking at the card. Because as we've also discussed, and I've had numerous conversations at the National about this, not all 4s are graded equally.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, I had 2 1954 Willie Mays in 4s, one I think an SGC 4, one a PSA 4. The PSA 4, I believe, was what I would call an average 4. I think I had that price somewhere around $500.
Okay.
I had an SGC 4 that I would call an exceptional 4. This was a 4 that looked like a 6. I sold it for $1,000. Comps were, if you looked at them, around, I think, $500 or $600.
Yeah, so outstanding, that eye appeal factor, right?
So it's eye appeal, but the bottom line is just that not all, and pick the number, not all 7s are graded equally. Not all 5s are graded equally. So comps are a fair starting point.
Right.
But it's not a price. Because the last one sold for 500 or 1,000 or 10,000, that doesn't mean that the next one will sell for that. Then you also take into account scarcity of certain cards.
Right.
So if the last comp was a year ago, it's meaningless today.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, stop short of saying meaningless, but it certainly means less.
Right.
Right. It's a starting point again, but it's not even a super strong starting point, because a lot changes in the marketplace over the course of a year. Then you also have certain high grade cards, PSA 8s, PSA 9s of some of your top players. Just because the last one sold for whatever it was, doesn't mean the next one won't sell higher.
Right.
Where comps start to have a lot more meaning. If you're looking at 10 sales of the same card in the same grade over a period of a month, and for the most part, they all look pretty close eye appeal wise, that's where I feel like you have a pretty strong argument. Okay, this is the range. This is the 10 or 20% range that this card should be in.
Yep. So you have a sign at your table, like many dealers, that says buy, 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 or buying, 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 buying. I don't know which one it is. But, how often do people come up to your table, or how often do people come up to your table in this show and try to sell you something or try to trade you something? Was it 100 times a day, 50 times a day? And with it being so busy, were you able to give them prices, or was it hard? So
I would say this show was probably about 40 to 50 times a day. Very frequently, it's stuff that I can look at in a matter of a second or two and recognize that it's not for me. I did buy quite a bit of items. It is, I guess, a decision that I make to invest the time to try to look to see if something, if a deal can be made. And the better or more appealing or more attractive, whatever it is I'm looking at is, the more willing I am to take the time to invest to try to make a deal happen.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I I saw one. It was like, I want to say the kid was 14 or so. He's walking around with a full Tops 1952 set, and he was walking. He was going dealer to dealer to dealer, and I was just like, okay, like, are you really going to sell this? Have you seen people like that just literally are going to stop at every table and get a price?
For sure.
Yeah,
And it, in a way, if they have the time to invest to do it, it's smart because you just never know
yeah.
who a potential buyer is. I know I wholesaled a few things. I have my younger son Osriel likes to go around and sell to other dealers. So I give him stuff and he made quite a few sales.
Nice. So as far as with how much you were selling, did you feel any need to try to add your inventory because maybe your cases were getting lighter, or did you bring enough that wasn't a concern?
So the bigger concern was really just having a minute to fill in. I had plenty of inventory with me,
Mm,
but I didn't always have the time to go fish it out to put it into the case because it was one person after another 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 person. It
yeah.
was just this is back to how busy it was just insane how busy it was. There were guys who came back around, I think on like Thursday or Friday. Hey, I tried to get to your table the other day, but when I got here, people were 2 deep or 3 deep. I just
Yeah.
decided to come back.
Yeah. It's that's where when people tell me, "Oh, I'm just going to get to the show at 11 or 12." I'm like, "Are you nut?" Like I was like, "Are you nuts?" Like 9:30 to 10:30, you can at least shop. It's like, so I don't even know how to describe it. And the other thing I would say is, uh, I heard Sunday, which is pretty traditional. Sunday was the slowest day, is what I heard. And you could tell me if I'm wrong, but another strategy, and I understand stuff been picked through, quote unquote, picked through, but a good strategy might be to try to go there on Sundays because you could actually walk around.
So it really depends on your goal.
Yeah.
I know for me, when I'm looking for things for either for my personal collection or to try to find something that I can buy with enough margin that I could buy from another dealer, it needs to be early. It needs to be first thing because the things I'm looking for are gonna get sold fast
Yeah.
if they're out there, if they're even out there or available.
Yeah.
If you're more relaxed, if you're looking for more common items or common cards, then for sure it's a strategy to come on Sunday because it is absolutely slower. And you also have, certain dealers. I don't think it was the case at this national. Certainly wasn't the case with anybody I talked to. But sometimes it shows there are guys that depend on a certain amount of sales, and if they don't have them by Sunday, so you might find them a little more flexible price wise. Again, you're not going to find the really hard to find stuff or the really primo stuff unless it's priced, and even sometimes even when it's priced high, like we were talking about before, like that 54 Mays I told you about, there's enough people out there recognizing some of those differences and that not all cards are graded equally. There's less fear to pull the trigger at higher price points for those cards that look that much superior to the grade.
Yeah.
So those cards probably are going to be harder to buy on a Sunday. But
Yeah.
if you're looking for average cards, lower grade, higher supply, more common cards, absolutely a strategy to stop on Sunday and definitely much more elbow room.
Yeah. I'm in a similar boat than you because, I think I need like 30 Clementes, and a lot of them I probably saw, I don't know, 5 out of the 30 at the show. So I'm kind of similar to you that I really need to be there at opening night so I don't miss that opportunity. But switching gears a little bit, I've heard dealers say I save inventory for the national. And, to me, from a business standpoint, that doesn't sound very smart. Like, to me, make a sale when you can make a sale. I mean, do you do that too? Do you save cards for the national and you're not available prior, or what's your opinion on that?
So I haven't done that, but it's really interesting because based on my experience, particularly at this national, I'm thinking that it might actually be a relevant strategy. And to that point, it's part of the number of eyes. When you go, like when I do a regional show,
Yeah.
I do the and I only do the largest regional shows on the East Coast. So these are not small shows. They draw thousands of people.
Yeah.
But I'd be shocked if there was under 100,000 people that came to the National. So I've had, for example, a couple of great Babe Ruth cards that I've taken throughout my entire show circuit this past year. I've had them for a year. Right? To your point, make the sale when you can make the sale. And I've offered them for less than I sold them for at the National. So, and I have people trying to haggle and and especially for the right cards, I'm thinking, why am I wasting my time bringing these to these regional shows where people aren't buying them?
Yeah.
Why don't I just save them and I'll bring them? I know there's a really good likelihood I'm going to sell them at the National. I'm just thinking, even in the past, I've had other great cards. I had a 33 Gaudy Babe Ruth in like an SGC 5.5. It's like a mid 5-figure card. I had a 1934 Lou Gehrig in also, I think, either a 5 or 5.5. It's a low 5-figure card. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous cards. I had a 48 Leaf Jackie in a 5.
Wow.
Another mid 5-figure card. Took them to a handful of the major shows. It was very fair with my pricing. I was asking questions, but no takers. I ended up selling those on eBay for more than I offered them to people at the shows.
Wow.
So I think it's about reaching the right audience, right? And sometimes, and with some of the stuff that I do, like, as you know, I do a lot of the oddball and the rarities and obscurities, things you can 1 of 1, 1 of 2, 1 of 10, and half the people looking at them don't even know what they're looking at. I think it's a function of really asking the question: where's my audience? Where is the potential audience of buyers? And I know I use a lot of different avenues. These days I do use Facebook quite a bit because some of the groups are very targeted to the audience I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So why am I going to bring it to a show and have 98% of the people who see it not care or not even know what they're looking at when I can put it up online? Similarly, so when I have, those higher end, those better cards, I'm probably still going to bring them to the regional shows, but I'm going to have in the back of my mind for sure, I'm in no hurry to sell these.
Yeah, don't settle on a price.
Because I know I have a high degree of confidence these cards will move at the National. Yeah. The audience is there.
It does make sense, and I think maybe there's also more of a I'm trying to think of the right word, casual collecting audience there, and you never know, there could be somebody there that's a casual collector that just wants a Jackie Robinson card, and they're not so worried about comps, right? And they only maybe buy cards at the National once a year, and you might be gaining some of those people too, of like I'm just here to have a great experience, and like this is the card I came for, right? That's possible
for sure. And some of it is just numbers. Like I said, at a larger regional show, there's going to be thousands of people, which is a pretty good number of people. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't hold a candle. Like I said, I'd be shocked if there was less than 100,000 attendees at the National. That's huge, man.
That's insane.
That's many multiples of the number of people you're going to find at even the largest regional shows.
Yeah. Wow. So let's put a bow a little bit on Cleveland as far as, you talked about how great the sales were and how great the foot traffic was. Outside of that, what's your overall thoughts of Cleveland? Do you have any other feedback about Cleveland that we didn't bring up here?
So I think there are, if we're going to go back there, I think there's 2 improvements that absolutely need to be addressed.
Okay.
The top of the list would be the Wi-Fi service needs to be improved. It is so mission critical for trade shows today. And it wasn't horrible, but it was spotty and it was slow.
Yep.
So we were able to conduct business, but business could have been conducted better and faster if there was better Wi-Fi service. And I know even a couple of people paid to have the enhanced service. They said it was a joke. They said it was no
Wow.
better than what was being offered for free.
Oh wow, that's like
And I think that
$6.
Wi-Fi service, I know they had different logins for dealers, different logins for collectors, and I heard some complaints from collectors. I think the collectors one may have been a little slower than the dealers one, and that's just not acceptable at
Right.
a trade show that is so dependent on that technology, right? For people to be able to look up cards on eBay, for people to be able to look up cards on all of the quote unquote comp sites, for people to do their diligence about buying the cards that they're looking at on the spot. That service absolutely needs to be better. Period. That would be the top of the list. The only other thing that I'd say could use some improvement, and I think some of this may be, and it sort of sounds almost like a repetitive line from the previous couple of years already. So it's like you start to question, well, they kind of should have learned a lesson already. But the logistics of number one, getting in and out of the parking lot. Number two, getting in and out of the bathrooms. Number three, getting in and out of the food trucks. I heard during parts of the show that there were lines at the men's room, 50 people deep.
Yes.
I heard that it took somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes to get served at a food truck.
Yes.
That needs to be improved. I know getting out of there the first night, and I heard there may have been some type of emergency, but it was literally as if gridlock.
Yes.
It took me, and it was only because somebody suggested that I go around and go out the back way. It took me, I think, 40 minutes or more to get out of that parking lot that first night, Wednesday night. So those things from a logistical standpoint should be improved. I won't say it's as mission critical as the Wi-Fi, but it's not too far behind, because the more time people are at food trucks, the more time people are waiting in line for bathrooms, that's the less time they have on the floor, which isn't good for them, and it's not good for dealers.
100%.
So those would be my critiques. That said, I felt like getting in, unloading, getting out was seamless, really, really, really well organized, well run. As I've told you in past years, I had some snafus with backup tables. No issue this year. I had a safe delivered. It had to get moved. It got moved really, really quickly.
Nice.
I hired security. The security was on point, very easy to communicate with. Everything else felt like it flowed really, really, really well. I heard even there were long lines at the doors. I heard a lot of those even flowed pretty quickly once the doors were open. So my critiques I'll leave with what I said. But I think all in all, way, way, way better experience than Atlantic City, like night and day. Chicago, I think, had the logistics down a little better. I'd have to go back and listen to our interview last year, but I think I wasn't totally happy with the Wi-Fi last year either.
Obviously, the air conditioning was a big sticking point last year that should hopefully be fixed this year.
Hopefully. Cleveland, the air quality and temperature got a little bit warm on Wednesday, but it not to a point where it was really anything noted or noticeable.
But is there a chance? Right, and granted, the hobby has ebbs and flows, right? I mean, you've been in it long enough to know. Sometimes you're up here, and then sometimes people lose interest, and then, is it possible though, with how the hobby's growing right now, and it feels like we're still going up as far as people being interested? Is it possible that Cleveland is too small for where? And granted, we're gonna have 3 years of Chicago. So the question might be pointless, but as far as like size of the building and things like that, do you think there's a chance it might be too small to hold the national if we keep going on this trajectory?
It might be, and to that point, the venue in Chicago may be too small as well.
Yeah,
I think they need to start looking for larger venues. I know last year I voted for Cleveland, not for Cleveland, for Atlanta. They have a massive brand new convention center. They have had a huge population influx. I just feel like the the infrastructure is there for this kind of size and scale that we've been hitting.
Yeah, I mean they have Super Bowls there all the time, right?
Yeah, I hope the dealers reconsider when we're voting again. And
I heard the problem with Atlanta was their presentation wasn't very great. That's what a dealer told me, that when they presented Atlanta to you guys, there wasn't all the information you guys generally get from Chicago and Atlantic City, and that there was about every hand raised up and we'll add a question to ask because the presentation didn't cover it. You disagree? You feel like it was a good presentation?
I do. That was not my experience. The thing that I heard why Atlanta got voted down is there was a national there. I want to say back maybe in 1996 or something.
Okay.
And most of the dealers did not do well at the show. It was a really, really poor show. And a lot of them still have a bad taste in their mouth from that, so they don't want to go back. But 1996 is almost 3 decades ago, and Atlanta has changed a lot. It's always a risk, right? When you go someplace new, right? Cleveland has been there. Cleveland is a known entity. Chicago is a known entity. So I understand why there would be a fear. It's like, well, last year we had here sucked. Okay, but take a look. Like, they've just built this brand new facility. They have the restaurants, they have the housing, they have the infrastructure. They have the air quality measures, they have the Wi-Fi, they have it all, and they have a massive population explosion since the last national. So yeah, again, that's what I heard was the bad taste that people had from the last national that had been there. I thought their presentation was great. It certainly enticed me.
Okay. So could you tell everybody, why is it in Chicago every other year? Like, at what point did that get worked out? And like, why was that agreed upon? I guess that's kind of confusing to me.
That's a great question, and one I don't have an answer to. I don't know.
Okay.
I think part of it may be Chicago has consistently, as far as history goes, consistently been just a great venue for the national.
Yeah, I understand that. I just, from a standpoint of wanting the hobby to grow and seeing all the Pittsburgh people at that show and thinking, like you said, if you had it down in Atlanta, Florida's close enough to come up, the Carolinas are close enough to drive. You need to start going other places to try to get that local collector to come. That's not going to take an airplane to the show, right?
I don't know that you do. Especially if you look at the attendance, like last year and the year before and this year, I think there's enough going on that the people who have real interest are coming, whether they're driving or flying or however they're getting there, they're coming.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask, well, why not the West Coast? Why not the West Coast? Never on the West Coast. I think you have a much larger concentration of both dealers and serious collectors on the eastern side of the country.
Yeah.
So to keep it somewhere east-ish is understandable. A show like the National, different from any of the regional shows. A show like the National, I don't think needs to worry about quote unquote drawing local collectors. If they're going to grab an extra few thousand people because they go to Atlanta or to California or wherever else, that's not going to put a dent in the kind of attendance numbers that they're getting.
Okay.
When you're talking about a larger regional show, where a couple thousand people could be, 30%, 40%, 50% of the attendance, that's maybe a different thought process. But I don't think the National has to go anywhere.
Okay.
I think that the National is going to draw people at this point, and to your point, with the size of the hobby, it's a destination and people are coming.
Let's talk about competition. Fanatics Fest, I think that's the name of it, right? Coming to New York City, and I believe they're stopping in Pittsburgh. I don't really know how it works. Like, I don't know if they go city to city. Like, I'm still a little bit confused about what it's going to look like and what it means that they're traveling. So what do you know about Fanatics Fest? Are you going to be a part of it eventually? I know it's not completely focused on the collector. It's a little bit of a mix of sports and collecting, I believe. So what do you know about it? Are you going to be a part of it? What's your thoughts, I guess?
So I don't know much about it. I do know bigger picture. Fanatics has made it very, very, very clear that they are looking to vertically integrate into the hobby.
Right.
They already own manufacturing. They own distribution. They have made it clear that we're going to be doing shows. Fanatics Fest, I'm sure, is the beginning of that. Talk to me in a few weeks. I may have a little more feedback in terms of the impact of it, because I'm doing the East Coast National, which is in Westchester, New York, not too far from New York City, where they're doing Fanatics Fest. So they're going to be running at the same time.
Oh, wow.
I see one possibility that they cannibalize each other. I see another possibility that they complement each other. Maybe it draws people. They go to one day and one the other day. Again, I just don't know enough about them. I don't know what kind of vintage card representation will be there. My educated guess at this point, and just based on almost literally nothing, but kind of my impression or perception, is there's going to be very little to no vintage there.
Interesting.
So in that way, I'm hoping it doesn't impact the East Coast National, but I don't know. I think there will be probably more modern, maybe, card game stuff. They're certainly pulling out all the stops in terms of bringing out all the big names, but my understanding is some of the biggest aren't doing any kind of signing. They're just doing appearances.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much people care about that, if they just want to go see Tom Brady, knowing that they can't get an autograph. I don't know. They're certainly a force to be reckoned with, and call it the 800-pound gorilla. So something I think everybody's keeping an eye on. I'm not averse to necessarily working with them or setting up the show if it makes business sense to me. But at this point, I'm just kind of watching what's going on, and we'll see what the future holds.
Well, yeah, and I heard that Fanatics was trying to buy a grading company. I heard whispers that it could have been SGC, and they were in the bidding war with collectors. Let's just say they are trying to buy a grading company, or they were. To me, grading's like the referee, right? And Fanatics is manufacturing the cards. To me, that's a huge conflict of interest. Do you think other collectors would feel similar, that if they ended up buying a grading company, that it's a conflict? Or do you think collectors would say, no, they're separate parts of Fanatics and they're going to treat cards equally, blah, blah, blah. So how do you think people would feel?
To me, I think owning manufacturing and distribution isn't necessarily as much of a conflict with a grading company as owning an auction company and a grading company.
Mm-hmm.
Where that's where I feel like there's a super conflict.
Yeah, because they own PWCC, right?
I believe they may.
And I think they're going to call it Fanatics Marketplace. Right.
Yeah. So right. So that being, again, that would be a lot more problematic for me than the fact that they own the manufacturing and distribution.
Okay. Yeah. So I invited you to the YouTube hangout. You came in. I know you had to be tired. So what was your thoughts of the YouTube gathering? We've had it every year, I guess, for, I don't even know, 6 or 7 years. I don't know the number, but what were your thoughts?
It was really nice. The one thing I always go back to, I remember somebody posted on Facebook quite some time ago. Facebook groups are so awesome. I so love it, and I'm so grateful I never have to go to a card show again. And I remember that quote just shocked me. Yeah. Because it's so refreshing. It's so nice. It's so cool to socialize with other adults who have shared interests and appreciate the stupid little pieces of cardboard that we love so much that people at large don't, and think we're nuts. Exactly. How much for a piece of cardboard? What? Why? How? Why would you do that? Yeah. So I think any of these events are awesome. I wish for myself, I just wasn't so exhausted. Because I would have, there was like a net 54 dinner that I didn't realize I got my nights mixed up. I thought it was the following night I was going to try to make it also. It happened to be the same night as your guys' dinner.
Oh,
And yeah, I mean, it was all I could do to muster just a little bit of energy to make it to your gathering. And I'm really glad I went. It was nice to just kind of hang out and talk hobby and meet a few new people. And it's awesome, you know, socialize, have an opportunity to socialize around the stuff we love without have to worry about selling or buying, or it's like just talking a hobby. Because as we've talked numerous times before, yes, it's my business, and yes, I'm a dealer, but I'm also a collector. So I appreciate it from both sides, and for sure, the collector in me just loves connecting with people in that way.
That's awesome. Good. So we're going to be wrapping it up here. I did want to know, did you have any pickups from the show you wanted to show off real quick before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so I actually sold quite a bit of what I did pick up, but I found 3 things that I could show you. So let's see, where will we start? We'll start with this is a very rare 1968 Topps disc of Paul Yastrzemski. It's the only PSA graded example.
Wow.
And ironically, I've owned it once before. It came off an entire sheet, which had an entire set on it at the time. And today, awesome. It's like I said, the only PSA graded example, and that is available for sale. With that, I also got a 1967 Topps Yastrzemski disc. This is the final process version. So there are a couple of color process proofs that PSA is graded. But this is also one of one, the only final process Paul Yastrzemski that PSA has ever graded. And they won't give these number grades. They'll only grade these authentic because these were never issued. The thought is that these were intended to be issued as pins and never made it into pin form. So PSA will grade them as authentic. This one happens to be in exceptional condition. If it got a number grade, this would probably be like a 7 or 8. Where the 68 has that crease, so it'd probably be like a 1 or 2. And then lastly, there we go, 1956 Mickey Mantle. And some people do, some people don't know, the 56s exist with 2 different backs. The gray back is much more common, to the tune of 10 to 1 in terms of population of the 2. The white back, which this is way harder, especially in this kind of grade. This is a PSA 5. It's a new grade and it's pretty well centered. And there's the white back. I picked this up in a trade deal, and that also is available for sale.
Nice. And I believe the story is that's a picture. Mantle didn't make the catch, correct?
You know what? I don't know. I think I haven't heard the story.
Yeah, I believe that's a story, but I'll have to double check on that, or somebody could say down in the comments. I believe he didn't make the catch, but unlike the Clemente one, I believe Clemente made the catch in his 56 photo. But
I sure hope so. That's an incredible photo.
I love it. My friend actually has the newspaper clipping in the original photo, and it's really cool. Yeah.
I actually had an opportunity years ago to buy the Type 1 photo.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I had 2 chances. One, the first one I should have taken. It was a lot of money, but relative to where it would be at today, it's like a joke. And then years later, it was still a lot of money. And at that point, I was like, photos are worth that much? I think it was like around $10,000 second time. And yeah, I passed on it. I thought it's great. It's a great photo, and I love photos. And I always thought they were underappreciated. And I was right, but I never put my money where my thought was back then.
Yeah, there are some awesome photos out there. So, as always, I want to give you a chance. You know, I'll put it down in the description below, but why don't you let people know where to find you at if they want to check out your inventory and things like that?
So I am on eBay, favorite_things. They can email me at hcv123@att.net. I do have quite a bit of inventory up on Flickr. I'm happy to send anyone a link who wants it. You can also call me 516-991-5535.
Awesome. And I got to bust your chops, man. I'm getting kind of tired of this brown background. You're a collector. You need to get some type of good background next time we have a conversation.
Fair enough. We'll do.
So I'll challenge you a little bit on that one. We'll get something on the wall there.
I'll bring you down to my my home office where I have too much stuff.
Nice. No, it's all cool, man. Well, Howard, it's always fun talking to you, man. I could talk to you for another hour, but thanks so much for coming out today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. If you like this, I appreciate a thumbs up. Much appreciated. Howard's also has a YouTube handle, so if you put anything below, I'm sure he'll be willing to answer it for you guys. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.